I've told the story as a comment on some YouTube videos before, but one time something happened to me that was very bizarre. It took me a little while to realize what was going on, but I believe this to be a real-life time slip. I believe that there is a way to move at least in between time periods like they talk about as time slips. One time I was in Ashland, Oregon, and this was when I was a lot younger in my 20s. At that time, I would pretty much take anything that I could get my hands on, or anything that anybody would give me for that matter. So one night a friend and I were at an open mic, and this friend offered me something that I had never been offered before. He told me that it was methadone, and he asked me if I wanted one. I had never taken anything like that before, and I didn't know what it was back then, and I really didn't care at that point. Like I said, I would just take anything that anybody would give me. And since I hadn't tried it before, I was happy to take one. And it was nothing psychedelic, or anything that would cause any kind of a hallucination, if you know what I mean. I know what that feels like, and the one that I did take made me feel pretty good. Great, in fact. And me being the kind of person that takes just about anything, I felt fantastic, and wanted to feel even better. So I asked him if he could give me another one, like an idiot. And after that second one, I really ended up regretting what I had just taken. Go figure, right? But I felt sick as a dog, and I began throwing up immediately. I decided that it would be best to just lie down at my camp. At that time, I was kind of a roving hippie, and I was camping out since it was the summer, and the summers in Ashland are warm enough to camp out. To get to where I had been camping out, I had to go by an area of town where there were lots of art galleries and little buildings where art was being sold, which was no big deal. I walked by there all the time, and it ran along these train tracks that were no longer in use in that area. No trains have run on those tracks for decades and decades, so I'm walking the same way I've always been walking every night to go back to where my sleeping area was. The camp was by the train tracks, but a bit further down past the art galleries. Going back the way that I always did, I go around the corner in between one of the buildings and the train tracks, only to see something that pretty much shocked me and left me dumbfounded. I see all these people standing next to this very old train, and they were either waiting to board the train saying goodbye to their families, or greeting them as they got off the train. All the people were in these clothes that looked like they were from the 1800s. Everything from their hats to the way the men wore their hair and their faces, all the way down to the button-down wool coats. And the women's wide and long skirts were also unique and looked like they were from an earlier time. Ashland is a sort of artsy town, and since this was the art gallery section of the town, I wasn't too surprised, thinking that people that live there always like to have different types of costume parties or whatever, or parade around and things of that nature. People do dress up at gatherings, so I assumed that this was some kind of a get-together for the locals in the area. Being super sick and feeling like I was going to just throw up some more, I decided not to go past all of these people and take a really good look at them, because I didn't want to get even more sick, and I didn't want to throw up in front of any of them. So I just shrugged it off and went around to the other side of the building to avoid everybody. At the time, I didn't think too much about it, except for noticing the train and the people and the style of clothes they were wearing. I mean, it was all out of place for some reason, and just seemed to be really, really old. And they just seemed to be sort of hobnobbing around, just kind of doing whatever, getting on and off the train, not noticing me. But the way everything was, it was just so strange. And I wish I had just stayed a little bit longer, but because I was sick, I just wanted to get the hell out of there, really. I had never really seen a train on those tracks before, ever. And I never thought about what those buildings used to be used for until about a year later they opened up a railway museum which had photos and explanations of what those buildings used to be, a train station. I was shocked and realized what had happened to me about a year earlier. I had somehow slipped into that time period and was somehow able to see into the past. I'm pretty darn sure that they didn't bring some old train downtown on those tracks. By the way, they used to have the train station just to have some kind of a costume party as I was walking by. It was all just too realistic. Like I said, why would they go to the trouble to do something like that? I could see how maybe in some circumstances this could be the case, but everything was just too perfect. The people, the clothing, the handlebar mustaches, it was all just way too real. Years later, reading all these accounts on Reddit and seeing videos on YouTube about people in time slips, it all makes sense to me 100%. Whereas before I had just seen the museum open up and thought, well, maybe that's what happened to me. But now that I think about it, there's no way that that was even possible. Maybe those people in the 1800s could see me dressed the way that I was in my modern and very strange clothing, and maybe they even took a picture of me if they had cameras back then. I kinda doubt it though, but it didn't seem like people were paying attention to me at all, but you never know. I could see them, and maybe perhaps in their timeline, they could see me as well. This glitch is pretty simple, but it's one that has me scratching my head. My granddad, who was my last surviving grandparent, passed away in January of 2012. Shortly after the funeral, the rest of the family was in the process of selling his home, which of course involved sorting through lots of his belongings. During this time, I was gifted an authentic China tea set. Presumably it was my grandma's, who had passed away years before. All 27 pieces were individually wrapped in pages of newspapers to prevent them from breaking. I took the set home with me and stored them in a spare wardrobe, and I didn't give it any further thought after that. Fast forward about 6 years, and I'm doing a massive cleanup at my house, and I come across the China tea set again, and knowing that I'd never used it before and had nowhere to put it on display, I decided I just want to get rid of it, so I wanted to put it up for sale. Of course, this means spending ages unwrapping all of the pieces so that I could take photos of it, and then rewrapping them again. As I'm unwrapping the newspapers, I noticed the date is January 2017. My heart dropped a bit as I looked through all the rest of the newspapers, and I realized they're all from 2017, even though they were wrapped in 2012, and they've been in the cupboard ever since then. Only my husband and I knew where the China tea set was stored, and considering that it was a spare room that he or I never go into, I'm very doubtful that he ever went in there to unwrap the entire set and then rewrap it within the year. I know for sure that I never went in there to unwrap that China tea set either. It's too time consuming to unwrap everything and then rewrap it again. What would be the point, since I never used it before and there was nowhere to put it? I wonder if anybody else has had an experience similar to this, and I wonder if anybody out there has any ideas on these time-traveling newspapers that I now have in my possession. I live in a pretty rural area and commute to work. It's a 2-lane, 1 lane each way highway. Drive for about 15 miles until you hit a stoplight at the edge of the town that I work in. On this stretch of road, there's a gas station on the right, a Dollar General, and about 3 million cows. This morning I stopped at one of the gas stations to get gas, and there was only one other car there at the pump next to me, and it was an old Jeep covered with a variety of interesting stickers, to say the least, and a gigantic American flag hanging off the back end. The guy kept trying to make conversation, and honestly, I was feeling uncomfortable, so I only filled up halfway and left because the store part wasn't open yet, so there was nobody really around. I was driving 15 miles south to get to the light, and I pull up behind, you guessed it, the same Jeep that I saw at the gas station. I can't understand how he got in front of me when I left the gas station first. He didn't pass me on that road, and it was the exact same Jeep, with a mix of all kinds of stickers, zombie stuff, loose references to murder, and of course that huge American flag. So I'm like, what in the world is going on? And there aren't any other parallel or alternate routes because it's so rural. The only other road that runs the same direction for that long is the interstate, which is about 10 miles west, and the gas station sits between the two exits. This happened yesterday. I was working remotely, as I'd been doing all week. I had done all my morning tasks by 11, and I responded to people getting hold of me, planned some things for a few hours, and then looked at my watch, but it was only 11:30. It felt like it was much later in the afternoon, and there was no way that I could have done my planning and responding to people in just half an hour. I thought to myself, well, that's kind of weird. It's like time stopped for me or something. I was hungry at that point. Usually, I don't have lunch until around 2 p.m., so I decided to watch a 20-minute video on YouTube. The phone showed the same time as my analog watch, and then I went to go make myself some lunch at midday. I watched 2 videos, no more than 15 minutes each, and then I just went to go make myself some lunch, and it was about 2:45 at that time, which I thought was impossible. I feel like time stopped for a while when it suddenly sped up through and caught up with me where it should have been once I noticed that something was very off with the time. It's really bizarre and hard to explain. It's a really strange feeling. There's no way that I was asleep, and in 30 minutes, time passed by 3 hours. That's more absurd than what I just proposed. In 2015, my brother and I were doing our daily routine of waking up and having a stogie on our back porch. I had my phone in my hand and my brother had the stogie in his hand, and it was freshly lit, and I had just looked at the time and it was 8 a.m. Out of nowhere, for some reason it felt almost like there was some kind of an odd sensation of whiplash, and then I felt very disorientated and looked over at my brother, and at that same time we both said, "Did you feel that?" It was the craziest feeling ever, and when I looked down, the entire stogie that I had in my hand had all burnt away, all but the butt. He still had his phone in his hand, and I was still holding that butt. When my brother picked up the phone to check the time, it was 10 a.m. We lost 2 hours of time that morning, and neither of us have any explanation of this phenomenon. Any thoughts? I live in South Texas, but I have lived in Kansas City when I was growing up, and I was 16 and my boyfriend got tickets to a concert. My mom was adamant about being home no later than 12:30. We left the concert at 11:30 and it took about 30 minutes to get to my house from there. On the way back, we hit this wall of fog on I-435. It was clear one second and the next we couldn't see anything. I was starting to panic, afraid that we would hit someone or something or vice versa. So I had him pull over. The fog was so thick that I couldn't even tell if we were pulled over enough or still on the highway. It was pretty frightening, if you know what I mean. Anyways, after what seemed only to be about 10 minutes, the fog lifted, and he took me home. My mom was already asleep, and I went to lie down, and that's when my boyfriend called me. And he said, "You want to know what happened? Look at what time it is." And I saw what time it was, and it was almost 4 in the morning. It was 3:45 a.m. I was like, wait a minute. How long were we pulled over on the side of the road? Definitely not 3 hours, and not even 30 minutes. I would say no more than 15. It felt more like 10. So what happened? I still have not been able to explain that one to anybody. Did I see an old 1950s white rusted Chevrolet car? It was about 3 a.m. and I was coming home from Trevino's restaurant on Closner. When I passed Whataburger, I saw, through the corner of my eye, a car passing me. I did not want to turn and see it. He passed me and got in front of me, and I started to slow down, so I moved to the right lane. Then he moved again and got in front of me, so again I moved back to the left lane, and he again moved and got in front and completely stopped. After that happened, I hit the car, and I noticed something, that as I hit the car and started to panic, I tried to catch my breath, and I noticed that there was nobody in the car. I could see the steering wheel moving, and I saw in disbelief at the same time that the car was completely empty. I did not want to be staring at the car, and I thought that maybe the person in that other vehicle was hurt. So I reversed my car, and by the time I looked to the front, the car that I thought that I hit, that rusty old Chevrolet, was no longer there. It disappeared. I took a different route home, and all the way I was thinking and asking myself, what did I just see? Then I remember that years earlier, I heard about a girl talking about that very same car. Her and her friend saw the car and it did the same thing. It would get in front and it wouldn't let them go. Then suddenly it slowed down and let them pass by, and nobody was driving that older car. They were yelling and they were so scared, they just passed the car and took off. I'm not even sure how to categorize this. Is this some kind of a ghost car, or is this something from another dimension? Probably both. I don't know how to explain it, but I do know one thing. This thing scared the living daylights out of me.